waver from sound mind to illusion in the beat of a heart.
Reason for seeking
From your bond
carrying
to the
us.
God of War himself.
Be free of the madness that infects you. You
What has
must
brought you to
defeat
this
those
betrayal
who
of your-
hold your bond with the God of War.
That is the past, Orcos.
Has been plotting for years.
Find the eyes, and they will show you the path to freedom.
As Kratos looked upon the gem, he realized all he need do was fight the forces that gnawed at his mind. His thoughts now clear, the warrior turned his rage to the remaining Furies and their ultimate defeat.
You seem confused, Kratos. Having trouble remembering our special time together? But then again, we were rudely interrupted by my sister. You have caused me pain for the last time, Spartan!
And welcome back to episode 7 of Let's Play God of War Ascension. We are now in chapter 16, Prison of the Damned Part 2. Prison of the Damned Part 2 opens up with a big fight to welcome us into the second half of the game. And it is a pretty difficult, long fight with one Cerberus and many Megara's infected prisoner minion things that we fought way back in episode 1. We have a little bit more gear to play with, but it doesn't change the fact that this opening fight is quite difficult, and I am going to die a couple of times to it. There's one, because of a mistimed jump. Oops. And we're going to have our second one, again, because of that stupid shockwave attack. But I believe that is it for deaths in this video. They're both from this fight, because this fight here is the most difficult fight of this particular chapter of the game. And the most difficult fight to open up the second half of the game here officially. Well, technically the next episode opens up the second half of the game officially, but this is kind of the welcome mat. This is kind of the interlude to get us into the second half of the game. And it kind of points out the weird difficulty spikes and pacing that God of War Ascension has based off of its story structure, which again, I do like the story structure, but in terms of how it affects the combat of this game, a little strange on just how we get these long periods of time where nothing is difficult or nothing's going to challenge us, and then we get these big battles that suddenly test everything that we've been learning and everything we've been coming up against and throwing everything at us all at once. It's kind of strange just how this game does that, and how there isn't like a linear spike in difficulty, and how we just get these this kind of weaving as we wait very long periods of time for the next set piece. So it's a big fight to open up this chapter up, but there's not really anything to it. So I think I'm going to talk about Orcos a little bit, because you know what? I like Orcos. He's a good character. Voiced by, I believe, veteran voice actor Troy Baker. Very well characterized. I really enjoy Orcos' character. It's nice to give Kratos allies, because Kratos by himself is cool, but he works better with allies, I think. Someone to play off of Kratos' general attitude towards all things in life. It's nice to have someone there that can I can kind of challenge him and speak to him, and I like Gorgos' character design, like his actual look. It's really cool. I like how he has all these bloody stumps and little indents all over his body, indicating where he has removed all of the odes that he used to keep for his mothers, the Furies. It's a really cool design, good character. I like Gorgos a lot. And I like having him as part of this game. And that's the end of the Cerberus. Cool. With the death of that Cerberus, that's basically the end of this fight. You still have to keep fighting more of the infected prisoner minion people here, but there's no more big juggernaut-like enemies to worry about. We get this weird pause for some reason before more prisoners show up. I don't know why. It's just one of those weird things about how Ascension works. We took down the big guy, you'd think the fight would be over, but no, we keep it going for a little longer. Just kicking him. Whatever, though, that's the end of the fight. So now we can actually move on and make our way over to that hand that Kratos is looking at, which is actually the entryway to the Fury Citadel, where the other Furies are hanging out at. And in order to make our way there, we have to go ahead and actually rebuild the entire Prison of the Damned. The Prison of the Damned that Megara and Kratos destroyed in their initial rampage across the Hecatoncheires. You'll be seeing brief flashes of it here and there. For now, though, we're going to go ahead and collect our final collectible of the game, the final Gorgon's Eye, to finally fully max out both our magic and our health. We maxed out our magic last time. I didn't say anything about it, but we did max out our magic last time. And now we're going to see what happens when you open white chests. After you've collected everything. After you've collected everything, every time you open a white chest, it acts as a big red orb chest where you get a ton of red orbs for busting open the chest. So definitely make it a priority to collect all the Gorgon's Eyes and Phoenix Feathers as soon as you can. That's the first mention of Electo, by the way, that particular record from the Scrap of Hecatoncheires. Collect all the Gorgon's Eyes and Phoenix Feathers that you can as early on as possible so that all the white orb chests can become red orb chests. Here's a cutscene now.
I have watched you over the years. When you were just a boy, I saw the signs. Even the loss of your brother did not sway your focus. The tragedy only improved you. You honed your skills. And now, Kratos, you have fulfilled your promise of greatness. You served with honor. You brought glory to us all, and today, you have earned your place among us as the greatest general Sparta has ever known.
So, there is something you value more than ambition.
With Megara dead, we have two more Furies to take care of. That Electo that was mentioned by the Scrap of Hecatoncheires, and Tisiphone, who is the illusionist, the one who actually makes all the illusions that we have to deal with. This, by the way, is the 6th artifact, Orcos' Cloak. Now it's ours. Orcos' Cloak is something you can actually see in Rise of the Warrior, because he actually wears that in Rise of the Warrior for most of it, back in episode 0. Now we're introduced to these enemies. Another mythical creature thing that we have to take on. I don't know the name of this one. I have not bothered to look up what this thing is, but pretty straightforward. This one is not nearly as bulky as Juggernauts or Cerberuses, and not nearly as annoying as Sirens. You also don't fight this thing nearly enough for it to be super annoying. You fight it here, you fight it, I think after this, only 2 more times throughout the entirety of the game, so, you know. weird how Ascension paces its thing, how Ascension paces out its monsters and stuff, in my opinion. That takes care of it. Like the Sirens, there's no special QTEs for taking them out, and like the Sirens, when you kill them via cutscene as opposed to just regularly using the Blades of Chaos to destroy them, then they just give you blue orbs in addition to red orbs. I had the opportunity to open that chest, so I did, just to make sure to top off my health, because that's always a good idea to do in God of War, because you never know what you're facing next. In this particular case, we're not going to face anything too difficult. The most difficult fight of Prison of the Damned Part 2 was that first fight with the Cerberus. Everything else is just there to get in your way and just there to... I don't know, because technically all of this Prisoner of the Damned Hecatoncheires stuff is the end of the game. Like, all this stuff takes place after Kratos' journey to see the Oracle, and after his journey to Delos to get the Eyes of Truth, which we'll know the conclusion of. We'll know what actually happened once in a few episodes when we actually get there and start doing stuff. But all this stuff is supposed to take place after Kratos does all that stuff, and yet it's much easier and more straightforward to do all this stuff than getting to the Temple of Delphi, than getting to Delos, than being in Delos for the most part. All this stuff is much easier, and it's like the Furies aren't really putting up that much of a fight. It's kind of weird how this all works. Again, story-wise, I really like it, but gameplay-wise, it just kind of makes it feel a little weird and gives you too much downtime in between big epic moments. And downtime is important in between big epic moments, but there's a lot of it in Ascension. Also, I'm not a fan of the fucking invisible walls in Ascension. That's going to screw me over in the next episode, I believe, when we actually make it to Delos and start doing stuff in Delos. The invisible walls in this game are inconsistent and are weird and can really mess things up when you expect one thing to happen, but then something else happens instead. It's not a big fan of the invisible walls and how they work in Ascension. In the meantime, though, we are on our way to the next chapter of the game, because Prison of the Damned Part 2 is not long at all, pretty straightforward. The next chapter is even shorter, I believe, with only one big fight to speak of and worry about. In the meantime, I can say, happily, that this all looks amazing, and the Hecatoncheires, that the Aegean that we killed again, looks really cool. This is where we chased Megara back in the beginning. We can't go the same way that we chased her initially, but we can go this way. Where there was once a red orb chest and a record, now there is a decayed chest that we can destroy. That is number 6 of 7. There's only 1 to go. And now we jump into chapter 17, Martyr's Chamber, which is comprised of 1 puzzle room and 1 cutscene, or 2 cutscenes technically, and 1 fight. 1 big fight. And that is basically it. It is very straightforward, very short. There is not much to it at all. For a big final area, this is supposed to be the big final area chronologically in terms of Ascension. It's really, really underwhelming compared to other big final areas in the God of War series, in my opinion. Again, though, that's not to say I don't like this game at all, because I think Ascension is a great game. And if this is the weakest that the God of War series gets, then we are in for a pretty great series, I think. But playing this game again and looking through all the footage, it's pretty clear why the development teams, why Santa Monica Studios felt that they had to do something, do a dramatic change to Kratos to really make sure the franchise stayed afloat and stayed relevant nowadays, because This kind of gameplay definitely has its place, but it's a kind of gameplay that thrives on lots of ideas, lots of moment-to-moment ideas to keep the moment-to-moment gameplay fresh and exciting. And it was clear that Ascension had that in some respects, but not nearly in as many respects as the other titles do, leading to its lowest score for the franchise and leading towards the hiatus that would eventually lead us to the Norse mythology era God of War titles, both the 2018 title and whatever the 2020 title, whatever the 2021 title ends up being called. Probably Ragnarok, but probably something else. We don't really know what it's actually going to be called. Another white chest. Remember, they're all going to have red orbs from here on out. It's still worth it to open all of them. And now we're going to get a cutscene where we get to meet the Scribe of Hecatoncheires. Enjoy.
This will definitely have to go into the record. Record. Must record. Must record. You're the Spartan that Orcus talked about, aren't you? Definitely need to get this down. Definitely need to get this down.
What do you know of the Oathkeeper?
I know he paid for what he's done. They say he was the first marked one, but his father didn't like the way he turned out. I know. I was the first man to be put here by the Furies. See? I've been keeping a record. Orcus was born here. Then his mothers, they became... They used to be fair. Harsh, but fair. Had something to do with Ares, I imagine. The way they treated him. Oh, their own son.
That is no reason to betray your own.
Betrayed his own? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? But he did it because of you.
I did not ask for his help.
But you received it nonetheless, didn't you, Spartan? This will make a wonderful addition to the record.
It's nice to meet the Scribe of Hecatoncheires. It's interesting Kratos thinks that parents being awful to their children isn't a good enough reason for the children to betray the parent. Considering that in Dad of Boy 2018, Kratos does have a boy that's with him. And he's not awful to Atreus by any means in that title. And it's just interesting that, that in this time he thinks that even parents being awful to their children doesn't mean the children should betray the parent. It's just interesting. Regardless, we have ourselves a fight. This is the one and only big fight of Martyr's Chamber. You take on a Siren, you take on a Medusa later on, and you take on a bunch of the infected prisoners. And that'll basically be it. So, really straightforward fight. You now have the Amulet of Ouroboros. You should have full magic. There is no reason to have major trouble with this fight. I do take a few licks in because the Sirens are just so goddamn annoying in Ascension. But overall, compared to pre-fighting Castor and Pollux, you now have the gear necessary to really make sure that fights like this are not as big a deal as they would have been earlier in the game. And again, magic really messes up Sirens and really throws them off their game, so... This fight not nearly as difficult as the fight with the Cerberus, but it is an indication of the kind of fights that we'll be dealing with more often. I got stuck trying to climb, and I got hurt because of it. This fight is an indication of the kind of fights that we will be dealing with throughout the majority of the second half of the game. The second half of the game does not take it easy on you. We do deal with more mythical creatures more often throughout the second half of the game. Not nearly as often as you would in other God of War titles, but still often enough that the second half of the game is significantly more difficult and more dangerous than the first half. Siren is finally dead, thank goodness. But now, of course, I mentioned before we have to deal with the Medusa, so let's do that. You deal with the Medusa the same way you did back in, oh boy, way back in episode 2. Except now you have the Amulet of Ouroboros, so you can slow down time additionally and get some extra pod shots in as time is slowed down. You're probably going to want to use most of your magic against the Siren because the Siren is just more annoying than the Medusa and more difficult to deal with than the Medusa. But if you still have some magic left over after your fight with the Siren, there's no reason not to use it against the Medusa. This is the last fight of the chapter, so there's nothing to worry about after this. So feel free to use everything you want against the Medusa. Now that the Medusa is the last thing alive, I sped up because it's the same fight we had way back in Chapter 5. Still as long-winded as before, except now I have some extra stuff to, some extra gear to play around with. Some extra moves to play around with. But it's still just as long-winded as before. Because we still don't have the, one last piece of gear to really make fights like this super easy and super quick. But as I said, this is the last fight of the chapter, so feel free to use all the magic you want. Don't worry if you're low on health. After this, we get to move back into where Kratos left off last time when he was on the ship on his way to Delos. And when we get back on that ship and meet up with Kratos from weeks ago, he will have his health and his magic back, so we don't have to worry too much about how much magic we waste here or how much health we have by the end of this chapter, because we're going to get it all back. So we go ahead and move this block, just to have something to climb up as we did the first time. Join a nice little sip of water before I begin recording on the big mega episode of God of War Ascension, one of 2 mega episodes. The next one is going to be nearly a fucking hour long, and then the actual mega episode is well over an hour long, so that's exciting. Can't wait. Hope my voice doesn't just crap out on me. We'll see. Believe there is one more record from the scrap of Hecatoncheires. Orcos has escaped. He means to betray his mothers. He came to me before the dawn, said there's no escape in the Oracle's eyes. Her sight burns with truth. Exactly the reason why.
If neither pleasure of the flesh or glory will return you to us, then there is only one thing left.
Oh, Jesus, that is a big, scary dragon thing. Be careful, this is a QTE. This is not a cutscene yet, this is a QTE. Kratos is going to go ahead and grab something from the daemon's chest, and that will mark the end of this particular section of the game. This easy little interlude section as we move into the official second half of the game.
It matters not that you have my son's toy. It is your heart that will betray you.
Some weird thing that belonged to Orcos. We'll learn more about it in the future episodes. See you next time, ladies and gentlemen.
Kratos knew he was close. Close to a time when illusion would have no power over him. Close to the defeat of the Furies, and finally, close to the freedom he so desperately sought.
The sooner we get past Delos, the happier I'll be.
They say it is cursed. Too bad we can't sail south of Delos.
They say the great Archimedes built that statue for Apollo.
Why do we stop at this cursed island? He's gone. Let us leave this wretched place. Quickly, before we are cursed too!
And once more, see you all next time, ladies and gentlemen, for a Mega Sides episode. Bye.